All right, let's talk about the vice presidential debate from last night. So I watched this and I was really anticipating this because number one, the last debate was a complete circus. Now, as an American, I was embarrassed, but I was also, once I got over that, I was really entertained. You know, Trump, for all of his faults, he's a character. And, you know, if you have the slightest bit of sense of humor, you will laugh at him and you will laugh at his antics. So the first debate, you know, was a shit show. And once I got over the fact that it wasn't going to be a real presidential debate, I just sat back and enjoyed the show, and I was entertained. So this time around, I was curious to see how curious to see the energy between Kamala and Pence. And I also wanted to hear about the issues because we didn't hear about any of those during the first debate. So I was curious. I was really just, you know, kind of looking forward to this. And it didn't disappoint. It did not. We heard a lot. You know, they touched on some really important issues. We got a sense for both of their temperaments, for their dispositions. And, you know, I will admit my mind is already made up about who I'm voting for. And I don't know how many people are still undecided, but I think this gave a lot of context to folks who might still need some information. So in that sense, it was good. So let's talk a little bit about both of them and, you know, where they excelled and where they fell a little bit short. So let's start with Kamala. I thought that, you know, she looked good. You know, her presentation was great. She had her facts together. She was well prepared. And I expected all of that. I mean, she's a former litigator, you know, she's a senator. This is nothing that's not common for her. So, you know, I expected her to rise to the occasion. And what I really enjoyed, or I should say I really liked, is that she was able to do the things that Biden did not do in his debate with Trump. And I don't think it's Biden's fault. I just think because it was such a mess and because Trump was interrupting so much and taking personal shots at him, he was derailed and he could not get to the meat of it. And it just turned into just an argument back and forth. So like a good running mate, I think Kamala was able to go ahead and, you know, grab the baton and do the things that Biden wasn't able to do. And the first thing she did was she was focused on the shortcomings of the Trump administration. I mean, there are some things, you know, there's a lot of issues at play, but there are some issues that are recent and are significant, and those need to be discussed, and we can't scuttle around it. So coronavirus is obviously one of those things, and she went right into it. She jumped right in with the dates. You know, January 28th, he knew, he didn't say anything. He downplayed it. You know, those are the things that Biden needed to say, but he didn't have the opportunity to say. So she went right to the point. And another thing she did was she was repetitive. You know, I've learned in my experience with, you know, just in corporate America and in my experience as a professor, that you have to repeat things over and over and over again for people. You know, attention spans are short, you know, people are distracted. Sometimes people just don't even have the capacity to absorb a lot of information. So the things you want them to pay attention to, you have to just keep repeating it. That's the only way it's going to sink in. And she did that. She kept talking about the 28th, he knew, the 28th, he knew, the 28th, he knew. This gave some real context to the severity of his misstep. Because it's one thing to say, you know, he doesn't have a plan, you know, he's not handling this well. You know, those are all really like qualitative measures, you know, because those things can be disputed and people say, well, you know, he's doing this and he's doing that. But when you start putting dates out there, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. If you say he knew on January 28th and he didn't tell anybody or he didn't say anything to the general public until some date in March, hey, just do the math. That's 6 weeks or however long people can wrap their minds around that, whether they are into politics, whether they are intelligent, whether they are paying a lot of attention. Just do the math. I mean, you say to yourself, wait a second, he knew on this date, but he didn't say anything to this date. That's the kind of way you have to frame it for people to get it. And that's exactly what she did. And another thing is she kept talking to the camera and she talking to the people and saying, hey, what would you have done? What would you have done? Put yourself in our shoes. Because again, that brings people into the moment and they can say to themselves, you know, there's no way in the world I would hold on to that information. There's like, that's the way you have to talk to the American public. Because going into the details and the jargon and all this stuff, it's going to go over people's head. I mean, just like when they were talking about fracking, I would venture to say 80% of the American population don't even know what fracking is. So if they don't know what it is, they don't know which side to be on, they don't know the severity of it. But once you start talking in simple terms, people start to get it. So that was the first thing she did. She drove that point home immediately. The second thing she talked about was his taxes, which was another one of those really simple to comprehend issues that most people can relate to and I believe take issue with. You know, everybody hates the IRS. Everybody hates April 15th. You know, we all look at our check and we say, look at all the FICA and took a third of my check or more. You know, people go crazy to get tax deductions. You know, we all hate paying taxes. We all, and to feel like we have paid more than our due is offensive. And to find out that somebody like Trump, who is always boasting about how well off he is and all of his money and all these other things, to know that he only paid $750 in his income tax, it's insulting. And people, the average person, the average American can wrap their mind around that. They can look at their last tax return and look at how much they paid and know that, you know, they are middle income or low income or how hard they work for a dollar. And to say that this man just circumvented the whole system, it's just not fair. It's just not fair. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And then for him to go on and boast and say, hey, I was smart not to pay taxes. So that was a huge issue. Another thing that Biden really didn't get a chance to hone in on because of the nature of that debate. So I was happy to see that Kamala brought those 2 points home because those, I believe, are probably two of the largest issues. And those are probably two of the issues that are affecting people on a daily basis. And to know that he and his administration has led the people, the American people, wrong, has led us astray, has lied to us, has manipulated us. Those are the things that people need to hear. So she definitely had, that was a great strategy. And I was glad to hear that, you know, she went straight to the point. She had her facts, you know, she was well prepared. You know, I think her lengthy experience in government roles was definitely to her benefit. You know, she's had domestic experience, she's had foreign experience. You know, she laid out her entire resume, and I mean, you cannot question her qualifications. You know, you don't have to like her, but you can't say she's not qualified. She laid out her resume, and you know, and it's basically saying, you know, if something happens to this man, I'm qualified to step in. I mean, that was one of the questions because Biden is 78, or he will be 78 come time for the inauguration. And they said, you know, so both of these gentlemen are of a certain age. So what happens if they're not fit or not able to resume their duties? Can you step in? And I think she answered that question extremely well. So Kamala, I think, did a great job. Just to be fair, I will say that I do think she probably needs to work on her facial expressions a little bit. You know, I suffer from the same thing, like where I don't have a poker face and how I feel is just kind of written all over my face. And I think, you know, she had those looks. She was, when he said something stupid or that she didn't agree with, or if he, you know, she felt like he was being disrespectful, you know, you saw it all over her face. And I personally don't see a huge problem with it, but I do think that it can be perceived a certain way. Especially because she's a woman of color. You know, there is this stereotype or this whatever out there that, you know, Black women are angry, we have attitudes, all these other things. And, you know, the eye rolling and the eyebrow raising and stuff that could kind of, you know, feed into that for some people. And for some folks, it could read as aggressive. So that is something she might need to be mindful of. But, you know, if that's the only fault, then you know what, let's give her an A, because that's nothing compared to, I think, the shortcomings of Pence and Trump. So let's get to Pence. Starting on a positive, I thought, you know, he was civil. He was respectful to Kamala. Not so much to the moderator. I mean, he would not allow her to interrupt him. He definitely spoke over his 2 minutes over and over and over again, and he kept going back to old questions. He was disrespectful to the moderator. But then the moderator had a responsibility to check him, and I don't know that she did that, at least not until really pretty much the end of the debate. You know, at one point she does say, hey, you know, Vice President, you agreed to this. I'm just trying to enforce these rules. She should have said that sooner, but she eventually said it. So, you know, he definitely, you know, railroaded her. But again, people will do that if you allow them. So that to me was really on the moderator, to rein him in, let him know early in the game, like, this is not acceptable. Again, I think he was civil, he was mature. He's in a tough place because he's in a position where he has to defend, explain, and support somebody who I'm sure on many levels he has issues with. I'm sure that a lot of Trump's behavior probably doesn't sit well with him, but he is in a position where he has to explain it. And that's got to be difficult. So, I mean, I don't feel sorry for him. I mean, he signed up for this job. You know, I'm just acknowledging that it's not an easy job. So it's hard to defend somebody. It's hard to be mature and to do the right thing when you're defending and supporting somebody who is immature and doesn't do the right thing. So he's in a precarious situation. But again, he signed up for this. Overall, I thought, you know, he dodged a lot of questions. You know, he went over on his time. But in comparison to what we saw last week, I mean, he definitely was he presented as an adult. He presented as, you know, he presented as a mature adult, which is something, you know, we haven't seen in a while from a certain camp. So I'll give him credit for that. Two things happened that didn't sit well with me. And the first was the question about Breonna Taylor. So the moderator asked, do they think that justice was served? You know, he pivoted so quickly from the fact that that young lady died, and he turned from, it's unfortunate she died, to what's really terrible is the damage they did to all these properties. I mean, it sounded very much like he was more upset about the damage to property than he was about the loss of her life. And if that's not how he intended to sound, then he really dropped the ball, because it felt disrespectful. You know, there is a way to stand by the system and the police and all these other folks, but not to diminish her death and not to, you know, to liken it to property damage. I just, that didn't feel good at all. Along the same lines, when they asked him about structural racism, for him to deny that it even exists just really made me feel like this man is out of touch. Either he's completely out of touch and he has lived such a sheltered life that he has no idea what's really going on out there, or he knows, but he's just trying to diminish it. And again, that's very disrespectful. I mean, I don't know an American who can say they don't know that this happens. You know, we can argue about where and how and what are examples of it, but we can't say it's not a thing. So for him to just deny its existence was just, it was jarring. And to me, those were two moments where I was like, you know, this man is just so detached from reality. He's not a person of the people. You know, he definitely is that old mentality of, you know, the white male privilege that we need to move away from. He is just completely out of touch. You don't have to be a person of color. You don't have to be a woman. You don't have to be lower income. You don't have to you don't have to have friends or associates from different worlds to just be aware of what's going on. I mean, you know, just watch television. To see these things and to just deny it is just, it's so tone deaf. It's just so disrespectful. And those are the two things that really stood out to me from all the things that he said, you know, and that's where I moved from a case of like, all right, you know, he sounds like he's halfway decent and, you know, he's just kind of, you know, he's attached to this animal and now, you know, he's getting he's getting a bad rap through his association. But once he said those two things, it's like, all right, you're really showing who you are, you know? So I don't know if this is going to make a difference to anybody. You know, like I said, my mind is already made up. I'm watching these just to hear how they respond. And, you know, some folks are still undecided, and I don't know if any of this is going to help them make a decision. This is probably the most information we're going to get about the issues, because if there are any more presidential debates, they're going to be pretty much more of the same, and they're never really going to get to the issues. So if you wanted to hear it, this is probably the place that you should have heard it. So I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen as a result. I mean, I don't know if this is just procedural because they have to do it for every election. But, you know, for me, it definitely, it painted Kamala in a great light. It showed how qualified she is. It showed her that she has the correct temperament, and that's it. So let's see what happens. And I'm hoping that there is another presidential debate, and I will love to do a recap of that because I'm sure that will be quite entertaining. And we'll see what happens. All right, talk to you later.